This Week in History, Mother's Day edition. History remains one of the most relevant topics of the modern age, and one of the best ways to observe history is to look back at the most important days of the year and how the people of our small but lively town went about celebrating. Mother's Day is one of those great important days that is chiefly focused on reminding our mothers how we are thankful for their care and that we care about them in return. This was a blurb that was printed to honor mothers' efforts during wartime. Uncle Sam's best friends are his mothers. No question about it. Essential war worker number one is mother. What a day every day. All the chores of peacetime and more, stretching ration points and still keeping the family well nourished, preparing bandages, salvaging paper, cans, and fats, budgeting for the war bonds and holding on to them, tending her victory garden and preserving its surplus, ending a long day by writing moral building V-mail. We've all made an important discovery in the last 3 years, that our nation is one big family whose every member is essential to our country's will to win. There's a new understanding of the other fellow's problems, a new appreciation of our individual ability and resourcefulness. We've seen pride, what our younger generations can accomplish, and we're determined to safeguard their right to opportunity in the land they call home. Sometimes we show our appreciation through gifts, and other times through actions. But regardless of how we do it, the intention is to show our appreciation. One such case was in Missouri in 1960s, where a convict, in a misguided attempt at a grand gesture, escaped from prison to spend Mother's Day with his mom. The Clintonian writes this about the affair. Murderer escapes jail to visit mom for Mother's Day. Farmington, Missouri, UPI. Billy Glenn Newhouse, 22, accused of murder, rape, and kidnapping, broke out of century-old St. Francois County Jail Sunday, quote, to see Mom for Mother's Day, and returned the same day. His mother, Mrs. Virginia Newhouse of Desloge, said, quote, it was good to see him. Mrs. Newhouse, her husband Bill, and an aunt accompanied Billy Glenn back to the jail, where he told Sheriff Clay H. Mullins, quote, it was all a mistake. I shouldn't have tried it. 3 other prisoners who escaped with Newhouse were still at large. The other fugitives were David L. Moyer, 20, Elvins, Eric Lyndon Montgomery, 24, Desloge, Joe Frederick, 35, St. Louis. Moyer was held for felonious assault, Montgomery for burglary, and Frederick for car theft. Newhouse said he had gone to St. Louis after the escape, but decided to surrender and returned after visiting his mother. Newhouse is awaiting court action Thursday in St. Genevieve County on a charge of venue for his first-degree murder trial in the death of an uncle, James Husky, 58, at Desloge last year. Mullins said the escape was discovered about 6 a.m. Sunday. 17 other prisoners in the jail's one-men's cell refused to follow the escapees. The sheriff said the fugitives had beaten a hole in the floor of the cell with a concrete block and tunneled the rest of the way with a spoon. For those of us who aren't in prison this Mother's Day, maybe a day out would be a good idea. While it's not quite as grand of a gesture as a prison break, as the saying goes, it's the thought that counts. One example of a nice time out, if your mom is the church-going type, would be tagging along with her, much like this poem published in the Clintonian. About my mother. Most all other things come by 2s, 3s, or even by dozens. See roses, the stars, the sunsets. Ah, there's brothers and sisters too, and uncles and aunts and cousins aplenty, but in all the whole big world there's just one mother. There's much more about my mother, and good it all must be. In fact, she's as good as goodness is, and that's enough for me. Her words are kind, her faith is strong, and her hope as high as the highest tree. You can see from here that she is a dear, she means everything to me. Not one single emotion comes nearer the divine than my mother's love for me. She is the soaring cloud of radiant rapture that lifts me to new attempts and strengths I need to see me through. I'm taking my mother to church this Mother's Day. What about you? If you're not feeling up to writing poetry, but you still want to express your creativity, maybe staging a show for your mother would brighten her day, like this article. Mother's Day program at Christian Church. Quote, Mothers of Men at Pantomime, written by William J. Yoakum in dedication to his own mother, was presented at the Christian Church Sunday evening by several members. This was given in 7 scenes and portrayed the life of a person from babyhood to adult life. Persons participating were Mrs. Maynard Malone and her small daughter Gayla, the first scene, Mrs. Marjorie Caldwell and Chucky Boboleski. The second scene, Mrs. Charles Doty and Mort Jones. Third scene, Mrs. Arnold Rodgern and son Jean. The fourth scene, Mrs. Ed Ruby and Kay Ann Newland, Barbara Nell Eastwood, and Chucky Bebelinsky. The fifth, sixth, and seventh scenes. A large crowd attended the service. Mrs. Frances Shulsky was director and Mr. C. M. Poor pianist. Another example would be in this article. Delts entertain mothers at party. Approximately 50 members of Delta Theta Tau sorority and their mothers enjoyed a Mother's Day program presented Sunday afternoon in the Half-Century Club Rooms on Blackman Street. Several bouquets of lilacs and spring flowers were used in the decorations Mrs. Everett Helms and Mrs. Cole Harrison provided at the tea table, which was centered with a large mirror topped with tulips and candles and surrounded by flowers and ferns. Music throughout the afternoon was furnished by the Methodist Church Trio, with Mrs. Ira Church at the piano and Miss Florence Auer, who rendered several vocal selections. Committees in charge were as follows: General Chairman, Miss Louise Hitt; Place, Miss Tatme Loti, and Mrs. DeFay Lee; Decorations, Miss Millicent Holt, Miss Margaret Crosby, Marjorie Little, Miss Catherine McDonald, Miss Mabel Reed, Miss Florence Auer. Miss Mary Helen Roberts and Miss Marie Field, Refreshments, Mrs. Dawn Daughtry, Mrs. Sam Oswalt, Mrs. Holmes, Mrs. W. N. Kelly, Mrs. George Walthall, Mrs. Charles Fernsworth, and Mrs. Martha Costello. At the end of the day, the way we most often express our love is through gift giving, and this is shown by these ads printed in the Daily Clintonian. Perfume for Mother, Revlon. Fine gifts for mother. Finest cologne, $2.35, $2.85, $3, $3.50, $3.75, $4.50, and $6.50. Bath powder, $3.85, $4, and $5. Talc, $1.85. Compacts, $1.50 and $2.50. Lipsticks, $1.10 to $1.75. Lipstick cases, $1.75 and $3. Sets and individual items: Chanel No. 5, Lintheric, Devastating, Pink Satin, Risley's, Obigance, Chalmar, Schiaparelli, Faberge, Rubenstein's, Coty, Max Factor, Gourdet, Schulten, Yardley, and many others at Gillis Pharmacy. Phone 832-3140. Forever After They Say I Love You. Plants for Mother's Day, 49 cents to $1.25. Make every day Mother's Day. Give her one of these gorgeous growing plants that she'll cherish forever as a lasting symbol of your love for her. All sturdy, long blooming varieties. At Murphy's, 233 North Main Street, Clinton, Indiana. Remember her on Mother's Day. If circumstances prevent a personal visit, your mother will appreciate a long-distance call from you. The telephone brings the real you across the miles. Lowest rate on out-of-town calls are in effect every evening after 7 and all day Sunday. However you choose to celebrate this special day and that special motherly figure in your life, be comforted by the myriad of traditions that have lasted over 100 years, and know there's no wrong way to let someone know you care about them. Thanks for watching.